So this is a project that's a little bit unusual for our office. It's about dealing with a different type of constraints that imposed by a half-built existing structure and a little bit of an urban rescue. In 2005, Chicago-based developer Teng and Associates released plans for a tower to be built at 111 West Wacker Drive, situated on a highly visible stretch of the Chicago River lined with architecturally notable buildings such as 333 West Wacker, the Merchandise Mart, Marina City, amongst its immediate neighbors. Teng and Associates plans called for a new 92-story building for this highly visible riverfront site, a building which would have housed the Shangri-La Hotel, residential condominiums, retail, and parking at its lowest levels. By the time the 2008 financial crisis hit, the building's concrete superstructure had reached the 25th floor, and when attempts by the developer to secure bank financing failed, work stopped, and the building at 111 West Wacker sat as a highly visible, half-built concrete eyesore in the heart of the city. And for those of you who are not familiar with the site, the Chicago River is one of the most magnificent urban spaces in America. Flanked by buildings, anchored by water, it really is the equivalent of an aqueous Champs-Élysées. It really is one of the great civic spaces in America. So to have this sit for 4 years vacant, this hulking mass was something that was very dispiriting to everyone in Chicago. The history, and this would be better if we could see it. So the history of the site up till the announcement of that construction was not particularly exciting. So basically in the 50s, there were small storefronts replaced by a drive-through bank in the 80s, and then up until construction began in 2006, a parking lot before Teng announced their project. And then the project was announced, and so it was to be a little bit over 1,000 feet tall, to have parking at its base, underground, more underground parking, ballrooms, a hotel on the 12th through 26th level, residential, and all the way up to the top. And you can see views looking east and west along the Chicago River in this view. Construction began in January of 2006. And Teng began without a full construction loan. He began with a bridge loan and equity finance, and ran into trouble in April of 2008, and then ran right into the buzzsaw of the financial crisis, and was unable to secure additional finance, and then basically lost the project to the bank, leaving $85 million in unpaid subcontractors who promptly proceeded to lien the site. I'm not sure if that's legible there, but the yellow quote basically says, nobody's going to get anything out of it because it's worthless. And so this amazing site on the Chicago River. And so it sat, from that period from 2008 to 2012, exposed to freeze-thaw cycles along the river, just sitting there. In 2011, a related real estate property recovery fund, which was a fund that was really set up to go after exactly these type of assets, was able to acquire the property. There was a need to move quickly because basically it was expensive money. So they issued almost immediately an RFP and an architectural competition in September. We were selected in November of 2011 and began work immediately. These were some of the first schemes, basically showing different studies for the facade that basically wound up capturing some of our final architectural intent. Wiss Janey began immediately doing forsenics, an evaluation of the entire structure. Halverson was our structural engineer, Cosentini out of Chicago, our mechanical. Everyone was full hands on deck to actually try to understand what exactly existed on site. And it was a very unusual structure. So you can see in this plan in massing here, there were extraordinarily large columns that faced Wacker Drive and the Chicago River. Some of these columns were 10 by 5.5 feet wide on the best frontage. There was a core that was 58 by 71 feet, which is the size of some small towers that we're doing here in Manhattan now. One full corner of the site was left vacant with a series of 2 or 3 story spaces with absolutely nothing in them. It was just a device to try to get the building up in the air. And if you see in the back of that core, again, more void space just to pad out that lower envelope. And so here you can see a close-up photograph of that structure as it faced the Chicago River. You can see the structure of the ramps and that little the little bow that pops out onto Wacker Drive, and the size of those massive columns. So we were asked to replan the tower, but with a much more rational footprint. You can see outlined in orange the original Teng footprint, which encompassed that bow for the tower, and that would be above that 25-story base, with that chopped angle at the back. And then basically that dark rectangle would be a normative residential footprint, utilizing the core elements that already existed within the Teng tower. So you can see all of the holes that actually came up through that base encompassed by the core in the center of the plan. So we came up with a strategy to try to shift that rectangle to the north to basically align with the outside face along the Chicago River by maintaining those vertical shafts that went up and down through the building and shifting the looser core elements of the stairs to the north, which basically then allowed us to capture that view. So that basically that view looking up the Chicago River was only achieved by shifting that tower 15 feet to the north. We were left with a bit of a problem, though, because we were putting tower where tower was never meant to be. So even though we had this very robust base, we needed to work with Halverson to come up with a strategy to reinforce that corner of the tower. And you can see the plating and jacketing of those steel columns that brought that additional load down from the tower down to foundations. The module of the base was at 13'9", which was appropriate for Shangri-La, but inappropriate for the rental residential product that Related had in mind, which would be on a 12-foot module. So we needed to figure out a strategy for dovetailing both the different footprint of the tower and to accommodate the new module. So working with Halverson, we came up with the idea of a transfer mat, which was 5 feet thick, poured in 2 layers that would basically mediate between the structure above and the structure below. And you can see the strands of the PT that would basically engage the lower and the upper mat, which would then be bound into a unified section there, which would then allow us to play, with that jacketing that you saw on the previous slide, would allow us to place the tower on top of that podium. We then set to work architecturally to find a way to integrate the base and the tower. And so the struggle was to find an architectural device that would both allow us to integrate the tower and the base into one unified structure, but also to mask the different structure, the different modules, and the different programs that were going on within the building. The retail parking, different module for the lower portion of the building, with a single elegant device. So we came up with the idea of these 2 interlocked serpentine ribbons that would wrap around the building that would lead your eye up from the river back up to the culmination of the building on the top, while masking all of those different elements. The lobby required for the residential was significantly smaller than that required for the hotel. So we were able to consolidate it into this central area and basically to create a tremendous amount of retail around it. On the left of the slide, you see repurposed material hoist elevators that became the new parking shuttles for the new public parking component of the project. In the base of the building, reprogrammed for the new apartment program with a mixture mostly of studios in this case, in order to take advantage of the additional width that we had there, the 13'9" module, and the additional depth, which was about 6 feet deeper than ideal for typical residential planning. And then up above, into the normative plate that would sit on top of that, base, we were able to outboard much of the mechanical equipment that would have been on this floor and put it into those 2- and 3-story void spaces down below. So in Chicago, it's typical to have electrical transformers on the floor. We're able to put them all down into the podium and basically have express conduits that would come up to the floor, which is much more of a New York solution. Tracking those floors up, you can see the imprint of that ribbon as it works its way through the plans on the 48th through 49th level, again as a cut on the 54th through 57th level, up onto the 58th level, and then basically the building elevation in context with those cuts designed to align with the shoulders of the LaSalle Wacker building on the right, and with the pediment of the old United building on the left to sort of lock it into its context. Began construction on September 26, 2012, and then basically a sprint for about 19 to 20 month construction, which was the fastest high-rise construction that we've ever been involved with. And so Lend-Lease out of Chicago should be complimented on an amazing job of construction and logistics. One of the things we were able to do, since there was so much additional capacity within those front columns, those front massive columns, we were able to directly mount the tower crane to one of those columns. And that basically freed up that entire ground floor, which is 35 foot tall, for laydown space to basically support the tower. We also had access to lower Wacker drive, so we could basically feed those material hoists on 2 levels from lower Wacker drive, from that floor, and have the tower crane be kept out of it. And we petitioned the city to allow us to keep it at the end, but they declined. It's pretty amazing. We were able to use the building itself for full-size mock-ups of the glazing to actually see how the glass would perform in actual light conditions. So this is showing the field glazing and that ribbon glazing from 2 different manufacturers. And since we had the 25-story structure already in place, we were able to basically run first 2 and then 3 crews for the building in order to achieve that 19-month construction time. So we basically had 2 glass installation crews working from the top of the parking to the top of the podium, and then another one starting at that podium and running up. 2 interiors crews basically following them right behind, and then a jump back crew that basically did the very bottom. Those cuts for the ribbon allowed us to introduce new zippers and starter sills there that allowed that that work to proceed seamlessly. So you can see that the second and third lifts of construction going on simultaneously at that point. This is a view of that materials lift that became the public parking lift. And then one of the things that we're proudest of is basically keeping 40,000 cubic yards of concrete out of the landfill. Basic stats on the project, $118 million construction cost, 20-month construction duration, and even with all of the stuff we had to deal with, we were able to achieve LEED Gold. The building completed in context, seeing that ribbon working its way through the project, those alignments with the LaSalle Wacker building and the United building. Some details of the project at the base, basically the portals clad in shadow veined Indiana limestone, custom screens at the lobby. The lobby itself, working with Kara Mann, who has offices here in New York and Chicago on interior design. Kara did a magnificent job. And then views at the transition floors, there basically were about 27,000 square feet of amenity space. And so basically on the bridge floors between the podium and the new tower structure, we created, along with those transfer structures, rerouting all the mechanicals, really all of the social spaces of the building. So this is a lounge overlooking the Chicago River, some of the apartment mock-ups. And then this is a view of some of that exterior space looking towards the south with an indoor pool, roof decks, basically looking out over the setback at that bustle. It's been very well received architecturally. One of my partners just picked up AIA awards last. And then one of the most important things was that actually all the subcontractors, those $85 million in liens, got cleaned up. So basically related, did the right thing, basically took them all into the project. And then when the project was sold, it was basically a fund that was created to basically develop the project and then take it out of that fund. The project sold for the highest price ever paid on a per unit basis for an apartment building in Chicago, and everyone who had ever been owed money was paid, which is also a great thing. And then just to recap, so basically nobody's ever going to get anything out of it because it's worthless. $328 million or $651,000 a unit, the highest price per unit price ever paid for a Chicago apartment building. Never count Chicago out. Thank you.